Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 265. This time on the podcast, Jen talks about accessing your internal power. Today's episode is brought to you by Pinterest, providing the internet with motivational sayings done up with fancy graphics since 2009.
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast. I'm your host, Jen Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jen is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to CareersbyJenn.com and click on support to learn more. Do you believe you are powerful all by yourself on the inside? Are there ways to access that power that can help you in your job search, in your career path, or even as you figure out what it is you want to be doing next? Well, let's find out right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jen, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to CareersbyJenn.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jen, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit CareersbyJenn.com after this podcast.
Now, before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded and brought to you over the internet from the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Matsqui, the Kwantlen, and the Katzie First Nations. One more thing to let you know about is that the Patreon page, which was down for a bit, it seems, is back up again. And I'm going to be adding some content there soon that is just for patrons of the Careers by Jen podcast. So if you'd like to help me keep this show free for everyone, do consider becoming a patron. There is a link in the description of this show, and there is a link under support on the Careers by Jen website. And thank you so much if you choose to become a patron. All right, accessing your internal power. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, often in the career realm, we talk about strengths versus weaknesses. We talk about fortitude, and we talk about persistence, and sometimes we talk about resilience too. But I was watching a YouTube show that our youngest is a huge fan of the other day. It's called Yes Theory. And I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not, but thousands of people around the world have. And I really enjoy it too. And I think that what the people who run it stand for is really inspiring. Anyhow, our youngest was introducing us to Yes Theory, and we watched some of the shows. And one of the longer episodes we were watching was where the Yes Theory gang, along with some very brave friends, went out to find out all about what a guy named Wim Hof was all about. And I won't go into the details of this episode. It's pretty dramatic and kind of cool, so you can go watch it for yourself. But suffice to say, this Wim Hof guy was all about accessing your internal power. He also talked about how your mind gets in the way of you doing very hard things, which I happen to know and believe is true. So it was very, very interesting. And that is what gave me the idea for this episode. Ideas come from who knows where. Sometimes they just appear. Sometimes I go searching. Sometimes listeners will give me ideas. Sometimes guests bring their own ideas. It depends. But that's how I got the inspiration for this episode. So now you know. What do I mean by internal power? I mean your internal strength and your fortitude and your persistence and your resilience and your wisdom and your possibility and so much more. And you have this, and you may or may not even be aware that you do. It's when life gets hard, which often it does, that you discover exactly how much inner power you have in the moment. I also think how much you have of the inner power depends on what you've been going through or dealing with at the time. Sometimes our tanks are full and we have lots of it and we can cope with things really, really well. And other times when stuff happens that draws on our resources, our tanks can be drained and we feel like we just can't muster up any more. Have you ever felt that way? How is it that some of us, and I would even venture to guess lots of us, can live through tremendously hard challenges and life situations and still come out the other side and carry on? Inner power. How is it that people all over the globe in some of the most desperate situations ever, situations I can't even fathom, manage to carry on? Inner power. Now, I want to say before I continue that I am a person of faith, and you know that if you've been listening to me at all. And if you haven't, welcome. And yes, my main vocation is that I am a pastor in a church here in the Metro Vancouver area. So if you too are a person of faith, you might credit your own inner power to that of a higher power, whatever you name that power, in whatever way you name that power. It might feed you and help you to grow your own inner power. And no doubt, it's how I see it. I am fed by the higher power that I call God. But if you're not a person of faith, don't worry, because you absolutely still have inner power. Just wanted to get that out of the way now before I get nasty emails about what I'm on about here. So what I am talking about when I say inner power is all the stuff like wisdom and resilience and strength and fortitude and persistence and possibility and more, all that makes up you. And wherever you name that source from is okay. It's up to you. But that's what I'm talking about. So why do you need inner power, and how can you access it, and how can you build it up and get more of it? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. If you haven't noticed, life is hard, right? Life as a human creature on this ailing planet is not a walk in the park much of the time. Most of us have had tragedy in our lives in one form or another. Most of us know and love people who have had really hard things happen to them. And maybe some of those people are us. Most of us have found ourselves in dire situations that we can hardly believe we emerged from. And somehow we did. Somehow we're still here. And sometimes that voice in our head gets in the way. And when we try to take risks and do something that stretches us, or we try to pursue a dream, or we try to drop everything that is safe and step out into a new adventure, that voice of doubt and negativity enters in and saps that inner power. And then we are afraid. Because fear can be even more powerful than all your inner power. It doesn't have to be, but it can be if we let it. Fear is a massive force. Fear can get in our way and prevent us from doing some of the things we most want to do in life. And now I have to say that fear gets a bad rap sometimes. Fear is also a good thing in many cases. Healthy fear can keep us safe, right? There are some things that we absolutely should be afraid of, and that our brain is doing all that it can do to keep us safe. There are very, very, very good reasons right now in this world for being afraid. There is a virus that does not discriminate, that is out there and will pick anyone that it wants to infect. And so, yes, there is fear of transmission. There is fear of getting too close to people right now. There is fear of getting sick. There is fear of infecting those who are in the most vulnerable population group for this virus. There's a lot of fear. There is a lot of fear in other realms as well. Climate change and politics and violence, and there are many things a person could be afraid of. And there are things that we absolutely should be afraid of. And so our brain is doing what it can. And some of the time it's good that we are afraid. But when fear of failure or fear of success or fear of not being enough gets in the way of you achieving your dreams, gets in the way of you maybe applying for a job you dream of having, or gets in the way of you pursuing training so that you can change careers, or that gets in the way of you taking a chance and going for something that you really have always wanted to do, then fear can absolutely sap your inner power. If you want to get the job, if you want to love your work, if you want to advance your career, you need to cultivate and access your inner power. And you have it. You have that power. You might not feel like you do. Even when you don't feel like you do, and it's there. In the video that I mentioned earlier that I watched from the Yes Theory, the team jumped into ice cold water in the winter and stayed there for a crazy length of time, longer than you're supposed to ever, using all inner power to be able to do it. Now, I don't recommend doing that, and neither do the creators of the show, but the whole point of the experiment was to prove that our bodies are actually smarter than we are. Our bodies are brilliant. They are brilliant. They are amazingly made. And when we quiet the mind and don't think so much, we can actually do far more than we ever thought or imagined that we could. And so that was the point of the video. You've heard of mothers lifting cars off their offspring in a car crash, right? You've heard of people being able to walk barefoot across hot coals. You've heard of the young tennis star Bianca Andreescu, who surprised the world by winning the US Open against Serena Williams, breaking all sorts of records and becoming Canada's top athlete of the year in 2019. Well, she attributes much of her success to her inner work practices of meditation and visualization. And she said on a podcast I listened to not that long ago, she said, "Your thoughts become reality. Whatever you say eventually becomes true." Your thoughts become your reality. And whatever you say eventually becomes true. So in other words, in order to access your inner power and in order to refuel the tank, you need to deal with your thinking. And I just want to go back to for a second to the being in ice water, the lifting cars off people, the walking on hot coals. Those people trained to do those things, learn to do those things by overcoming their thinking, by overcoming that fear factor in their minds. They let their bodies do, and sometimes they weren't even thinking. Their bodies did what their bodies needed to do. You've heard of people fighting off the bear that they encounter so their child doesn't get ripped apart on a walking trail, right? Those are things that happen sometimes without even thinking because the body knows how to do it. But our thoughts become our reality. And I fully believe that. Thinking is the human being's biggest addiction. We are so addicted to our own thinking. It's incessant. How much time do you waste thinking about things that might or could happen, or but probably won't, or thinking about things that have already happened, for which there's nothing you can do. Author and medical intuitive Carolyn Myss says that internal power is looking at what's in front of you and within you. There is not a behind you. There's nothing behind you. What she meant when she said that, I think, was what has happened in the past is past. Not that your past doesn't influence you, of course, because it does. But when you are wanting to make a change and advance in your career or in your life, it's much more useful and helpful to look at what is right in front of you and then to draw on what is within you. And in my coaching practice, when I use what we call solution-focused coaching or forward-focused coaching, we don't spend a lot of time in the past on the story of what happened in the past. That's for therapy, that's for counseling. But in coaching, if you want to get from A to B and realize the transformation that you are seeking, then you need to start right now, look at what is in front of you, and then go within you to be able to go forward toward what it is that you want to achieve. So how will I get from where I am right now to over there, where I want to be? What reserves inside can I draw on to give me the energy and the willingness to just do it? That's the question. That's inner power. So how do you cultivate it? Well, much of what I have shared in the Careers by Jen podcast and the previous incarnation that was called Communication Diva has been about just this. It's been about self-awareness, which I always say is a lifelong practice, and self-growth. And I have been told that I have the spiritual gift of encouragement. And I truly believe that there are inner reserves in people that they either haven't accessed or don't believe exist, and that with care and cultivation can be brought out. And I have watched people who didn't believe they ever could do something, do it, and just soar. And that's what I love about teaching. I taught college for over 2 decades, and that was my favorite part, was watching people who had struggled through learning all of the things they had to learn, eventually get out into the workforce and to be and do what they had dreamed of being and doing. That was my favorite part. And that's what I love about being a leader in the church, watching people grow and deepen into their faith and be able to do things and take on leadership. Growing leaders is part of my job. And that's one of the things I absolutely adore doing, is inviting people to do things and then watching them succeed. And then I also love that about coaching. It's believing in someone sometimes before and until they can believe in themselves, and then walking with them until they can realize their goal or their dream. It's just, it just lights the fire within, and it is just a beautiful thing to watch. It's what lights me up every day. So hear me deeply when I say you have this. You've got this. You can do things you had no idea you ever could. And so what are some ways in which you can nurture this? What are some ways in which you can grow your capacity for inner power? Well, one of the things to do is to take a look back over your life and think about all the really hard stuff you have already come through. What are those difficult, hard, horrible times? Because those difficult, hard, horrible times are the stuff of resilience, are the stuff that resilience and wisdom are made of. And at the time, you maybe had no idea that you could ever carry on. You maybe, maybe it was excruciating. Maybe it was like, the sun is never going to shine again. And yet it did, and you did, and you are more powerful and more wise and more resilient because of it. So take inventory or take stock of all the hard, challenging, scary things you have already overcome, because this helps to put things in perspective. If you could do those things, surely you can walk into that panel interview in front of 6 people and wow them with what you have to offer their company, right? Your body has lived through harder things than this. It's really good to look back over where you've already been and to tell yourself, I've got this. I can do this. So I said to myself recently, Scott and I were trying to do a plank challenge. It's a 31-day plank challenge where you start at 30 seconds and you work your way up to 5 minutes. He's gotten there. I have not. I kind of bail about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, which is still pretty good. But yeah, we were doing it the other night, and I had to say to myself, look, I've had 2 babies, naturally, but 2 babies without drugs. We have 4 kids, but 2 of them are my stepkids. So if you're wondering, wait, she has 4 kids. They're my kids too. But I've given birth to 2 children without drugs. And in a fit of, I guess, vanity and I don't know what else to call it. It was kind of ridiculous. I had my eyeliner tattooed on a few years ago. I don't ask me why. Runny eyes, makeup all over my face all the time, tired of it, went and had it done. And that was one of the most terrifying experiences ever, because one little move, and the person doing it was amazing and professional, but my mind kept saying, oh my gosh, one slip and you're blind, right? So I often will say to myself, I've given birth to 2 children and had my eyelids tattooed. I can live through anything. Now, those are not big, horrible, it's hard, but you know what I mean? Those are not traumatic experiences. But what I'm asking you to do is take inventory. Go back and look at all of the things that you have overcome, because it helps you to put things in perspective. If you can do those things, surely you can do this thing that you're facing. Your body has lived through harder things than what you are about to do. It's your story. And your story is who you are. Now, not all of it. Your story is not all of who you are, but it's a huge part of it. And it's really good to recall it, to recognize it, to honor it, and to embrace it. You have made it this far in life, and look at all that you have accomplished and all that you have come through. So knowing who you are is key, and it does take time to take inventory and take stock and say, yeah, I did all that, and look where I am today. All right. The next thing is to cultivate a practice of silence. Meditation, and we've done a few past episodes on the subject, is a scientifically proven way to prevent burnout, to become healthier, and to become more aware of your thinking, how constant it is, how often inane and useless it is. Sometimes thinking is great and wonderful creative ideas come from it, but a lot of the time our thinking is unconscious and it is unnecessary. And so silence can refuel you, and unhelpful thinking can drain you. So getting a handle on your thinking, even some of the time, by adding some silence into your life is a huge gift to yourself. Now, you don't have to do a full-on 45-minute sit if you've never meditated before. There are all sorts of apps out there, and even starting with 4 minutes is better than nothing. Work your way up to the recommended 20-minute minimum. Do more if you can, but do it over a number of weeks. And if you want to learn more about it, check out episode 231 on meditation or episode 161 on mindfulness if you missed those. And then decide to start adding some silence into your life, because honestly, it is one way to pay attention to your thinking, to notice it, and to be in control, right, of the thoughts that you are thinking, at least some of the time. A third way to cultivate inner power is to really pay attention, when we're speaking of thoughts, to your self-talk, especially your negative self-talk. And yes, we did a whole episode recently on automatic negative self-talk, so I won't revisit all of that. You can go listen to it if you like, but just be aware of how you speak to yourself. And catch yourself when you notice you are saying something negative or nasty or unhelpful about yourself or about someone else or about the situation. And just doing that will help you to conserve energy. If you can reframe that thought, it will nurture positivity. And nurturing positivity will help to increase your inner power. As mentioned before, if your thoughts become reality, you want to be making sure that you are thinking good and positive and useful and goal-oriented, compassionate, kind thoughts. Right? And that again is work. All this inner work stuff is practice. It doesn't happen because you've listened to a podcast. It doesn't happen because you've read a book or attended a conference. It's an ongoing life practice, and it is the biggest gift you can give the world, is to be the best you, the best version of you that you can be. Now, one more tip I'd like to offer you to get to help in the cultivating of your inner power is to learn the power of forgiveness. Forgive yourself and forgive others if you can. It is amazingly freeing to be able to forgive. Holding on to grudges and past transgressions can paralyze you, and it can suck the energy from you, and it can result in a whole lot of unhelpful thought loops. And I mean those thought loops that are so old and so ingrained that they are actually physically making grooves in your neurological system, because they are so often where you go to relive things that happened to you in your past. And yes, what happens to us shapes us. What happens to us is part of our story and is important and part of who we are. But old wounds do not have to define us, my friends. Old wounds do not have to define us. If there is some way we can even begin the process of letting those wounds go, of learning to forgive, of releasing those old and unhelpful thoughts, and of traveling those thought loops less and less frequently, if there's a way to do that, you will find that the energy those loops can consume can be used for new pursuits. You are losing energy to old wounds and old thinking, when you could be using that energy to further your dream. It takes so much energy to go to those old hurt places. And part of the reason why is that the body doesn't know the difference. Every time you relive a scene, your body kicks in the hormones and your emotions get riled up, and your body prepares itself to live through that scene all over again as if it's happening in real time. Actually. So you are physically draining your body of power every time you go into those old wounded places. You are literally wasting energy on something that you can't change, something that has already happened. And yes, sometimes it's comforting to go back and imagine all the ways you could have made it different, and all the things you could have said, and all the ways that it might have turned out if this hadn't happened or that hadn't happened. I totally get it. I go there too. But it's not useful. It's not helpful. And going there over and over and over and over again is not going to move you toward the new dreams and the new goals that you want to achieve. So, those are 4 ways to boost your inner power. Take inventory of what amazing and challenging and difficult things you have already lived through. Pat yourself on the back because you've done it. You did it. You don't want to go back there. The second thing was cultivate a practice of silence, of meditation, of stillness, of mindfulness. It doesn't matter what form it takes, but cultivate a practice of silence, because the world is a noisy place. That's the second thing. The third thing is pay attention to that negative self-talk and try to reframe it to something more useful and positive, and learn to forgive yourself. That's the fourth thing. Forgive yourself and forgive others in order to free up energy, the energy that you need to put into your inner power fuel tank. If you can do that, my friends, that you will be able to much more easily move forward into what you want to do. And my friends, you are truly amazing. Once you believe that, you will be able to do great and wonderful things. You will be able to go places that you never thought you could. And you will be able to do things and have success in ways that might seem a little hard to imagine right now. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you have a moment to check out the Patreon page, that would be most appreciated. It's under the support tab on the Careers by Jenn website, and I will put a link to it under the description also, that hopefully will show up in the podcast app that you are using. So until next time, do something today to boost your inner power, because it's there and you can. This is Jenn. Bye for now. You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. You know, if every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.